Hey everyone, I know it's been a long time since my last video, but I've been busy, really busy with work this past year. And as we all know, this past year hasn't been the best year with the whole COVID-19 pandemic that ended up preventing tournaments from being able to run. But the good news is I finally completed my ABCs, and the new banlist has freed my ABC Dragon Buster back to 3. So that really motivated me to do this video and give an updated deck profile of my ABCs along with a new text that has come out since the last time I made a deck profile on this deck. So without further ado, let's begin. I still maintain the standard 2 Assault Core, 3 Buster Drake, and 2 Crush Wyverns. I feel that this is the best ratio because running too many Assault Cores and Crush Wyverns can be a bit bricky. And Buster Drake obviously is the best piece of the 3 because it searches from the deck. So always max out on this. And in addition, I still run the 1 Heavy Mech Support Armor, the most underrated card in the deck. And I begrudgingly also run 1 Union Driver, and I would call this the most overrated card in the deck. Now, just as underrated doesn't mean it's like good. It doesn't mean it's overpowered or broken. Being overrated doesn't mean the card is useless either. And I feel that this definitely applies to Union Driver. It's definitely not a bad card because it enables certain combos that would not have been possible without it. But on the other hand, if you end up drawing into it, it's a complete brick. And drawing into this card is the last thing you want to ever have happen. What Union Driver basically does is that if it's equipped to another ABC piece, you can essentially banish it to equip another piece to that same monster. And this is useful because cards like Union Hanger, they say that the equipped monster cannot be special summoned. So by using Union Driver, you essentially completely bypass that restriction. So the monster equipped by Union Driver can be special summoned. So essentially that one monster literally just turned into 2 monsters, which you can now link with or exceed summon with. So that's it for the ABC pieces. What I like about ABCs is that the main monster lineup is really small. Like there's only 3 monsters and you don't even max out on all 3 of them. So essentially the core of the deck is really small and it can easily, it gives you a lot of room to run like tech cards that just work for you. So since I've run Union Driver, I obviously have to run 3 copies of Fantastical Dragon Phantasme. I recently picked up this card, and I know that ever since the new Master Rule came out, this card has become slightly less useful. But even then, Link monsters are still a major part of today's game. And if your opponent summons even 1 Link monster, you can drop Phantasme on them. And instantly, that's like a pot of greed right there. It lets you draw 2 cards. And it also makes you put a card back. But the good thing about it is that if you have Union Driver in hand, you can draw 2 cards and then put Driver back. And now that's literally a win-win. You literally got 2 free cards out of it. Its secondary effect basically adds a layer of protection from targeting effects to all your monsters. And that you can essentially discard any card, which since you summon it to the field, you will definitely have cards in your hand to discard to pay for the cost for a second effect. And it essentially not only negates the effect, but also destroys that card that tried to target your monster. So really good hand trap. Next up, we still run the 3 Ash Blossoms because again, it's never fun watching your opponent go off and search a deck for all their combo pieces and not being able to stop them. So yes. And lastly, for the monster hand traps, I run 2 copies of Nibiru, the Primal Being. This card is insane and is easily one of the best hand traps in the game right now. Because essentially, if your opponent has summoned 5 or more monsters this turn, you can just essentially drop this card on them and tribute all their monsters and basically negate all the progress they've made. And the thing is, because this card doesn't send itself to the graveyard as cost, your opponent cannot negate it with something like a Call by the Grave. And the thing is, it offers non-targeting, non-destruction removal. It doesn't destroy the monsters. It it tributes them. And depending on the monsters you tributed, your opponent could end up with a really big token. But in the context of this deck, if you can't run over the token, you can just banish it with your Dragon Buster. So it doesn't really matter that much. So yes, 2 Nibiru's. One good thing about Nibiru is that even if you don't have Nibiru, if your opponent knows that you run Nibiru in your deck, and let's say your opponent is going off on their combo, summoning their monsters, and at every summon, you count the number of that summon. Like, your opponent normal summons, you 1, that's 1. They special summon, you publicly and out loud, you count 2. That creates this psychological impact where it makes your opponent question, should I stop at 4 summons and and just call it a day? Or should I go with my full combo and risk getting Nibiru'd? So because of this psychological warfare, even if you don't have Nibiru in your opening hand, like, your opponent doesn't know that. They have to, like, either take a risk that you do have it, or play a less risky but less end up on a less broken board. Which means even if you didn't have Nibiru, you can bluff them into thinking that you do. So that's it for the monsters. Next up, 3 copies of Union Hanger and 1 Terraforming to search for it. I really hope that when I saw this new ban list, I was really kind of hoping that instead of Dragon Buster coming back to 3, they will bring Terraforming back to 3. But I guess I was being a bit too unreasonable with my hopes and wishes. Terraforming is not a hard once per turn, and it searches for any field spell to your hand. And considering how many good field spells there are in the game right now, including cards like Magical Meltdown or Union Hanger, and drawing this card is just as good as drawing one of these cards. And Union Hanger, it's basically the one card that makes this deck really good. But I would also argue that it's the Achilles heel of this deck. So what do I mean by this? Is that this deck, it literally lives and dies by Union Hanger. And if you draw it, it basically gives you a huge advantage. And you can basically go off full combo. In fact, like with the release of cards like Union Driver and Union Carrier, all Union cards. Union Hanger, if you open it just by itself, is literally a 1-card ABC Dragon Buster and a 1-card +3. So yeah, definitely max out on a Hanger, and I'm really subconsciously hoping that Terraforming comes back. Next up, 3 copies of Unauthorized Reactivation. I was testing this card at 2 copies and at 1 copy as well, but at the end I decided 3 copies is the way to go. So why do I run 3 copies? Well, because you're not always going to get Union Hanger in your opening hand. And Unauthorized Reactivation is essentially like almost like a secondary backup in the case that you don't draw open with Union Hanger. The good thing about Unauthorized Reactivation is that because it's a quick play, and all of your ABC pieces, they offer protections from monsters, spells, or trap cards. If you summon your ABC Dragon Buster and your opponent plays, let's say, a Torrential Tribute, you can chain Unauthorized Reactivation, equip, let's say, Crushed Wyvern to your Dragon Buster. And in that sense, since Crushed Wyvern makes it so that your the equipped monster cannot be affected by trap cards, that means like the Torrential Tribute does nothing. Or even if your opponent drops a Nibiru when you summon your ABC Dragon Buster, you chain Unauthorized Reactivation, equip a Assault Core to your Dragon Buster. Your Dragon Buster is now unaffected by monster effects. And essentially, your opponent's Nibiru won't be able to tribute it, which literally means you just saved your Dragon Buster from being given the board wipe treatment. And the good thing about this card is that it can almost act like a Forbidden Lance, a quick play Forbidden Lance, and on top of that, it's not even a minus. It's essentially a 1-for-1. Because it equips from your deck, it also technically thins out your deck by 1 card, and the equipped monster, it stays on the field, so that if it's still there next turn, you can special summon it. And it also offers like continuous protection as long as it's on the field. So yes, 3 Unauthorized Reactivation. It's the way to go. Next up, for tech choices, I run 1 copy of Scapegoat. Because again, like a quick play, that gives you 4 tokens. And hey, did you know that Union Carrier just says 2 monsters with the same type or attribute? and all the tokens are the same type and attribute. So you know what that means. One of these is equal to, you can summon up to 2 union carriers with it. Next up, 1 copy of Instant Fusion, because again, it got cut down to 1. So you can only run 1. But because of what I've run in the extra deck, going first, Instant Fusion is like a hand trap blocker, similar to Caught by the Grave. Going second, it offers you non-targeting, non-protection, non-destruction removal. And essentially, activating this, it only costs 1,000 life points, and it doesn't really commit to anything. So even if your opponent wastes a negate on it, it's essentially you just got a 1-for-1 out of it, and you haven't even like committed to your main play yet. Next up, I run 1 copy of Monster Reborn to because Dragon Buster, after it's been properly summoned the first time, it can be Monster Reborn from the graveyard. Foolish Burial, because if I have 2 of the 3 pieces, I'll be able to just drop the 3rd piece and go for Dragon Buster immediately. Cosmic Cyclone and Twin Twisters for the back row removal. I run 1 copy of each because like Twin Twisters, it has a discard. You have to discard something, so it's not self-sufficient. But in the context of this deck, you want to get your ABC pieces into the graveyard, because once they're in the graveyard, you can banish them from the graveyard to summon out your boss monster. So essentially, the discarding, if you're discarding an ABC piece, is not even a cost. Cosmic Cyclone is like MST, except it banishes and doesn't destroy. So in that sense, like, banishing is always preferable to destruction. So this card is self-sufficient, and it's a 1-for-1 trade-off, but it's always gets bypasses spell traps that have floating effects, like let's say Phantom Knight's Fog Blade or something like that. 1 Called by the Grave. I find that ever since this card got hit to 1 copy, it's become one of those cards like Max C where it became, you may as well run that 1 copy. Before, when this card was at 3, people were debating, should I max out at 3? Should I main deck maybe just 2 copies? Should I not bother running it at all? And there was all these debates. But now that hit to 1, you can only run 1. You may as well run that 1 Called by the Grave. Going first is a hand trap blocker. Going second, you can use it to basically banish your stuff from your opponent's graveyard as well. And also negates the effects of all monsters with the same name that it banished. So it's really good. 1 Upstart Goblin to make you the 40 card deck. You're technically running a 39 card deck if the 40th card is Upstart. Even though your opponent gains 1,000 life points, it's really not that big of a difference. Because 1 attack from Dragon Buster is like 3 times that over. So yes, 1 Upstart. And finally, the last spell card I run. Let me get it for a second. Lightning Storm. I finally picked up this card. Before, I was running 1 copy of Raigeki, but I find that Lightning Storm is just better than Raigeki in every single way. Raigeki only destroys monsters. Lightning Storm gives you the option to destroy either monsters or back row as well. So it can, depending on the circumstance, it has the best of both worlds from Raigeki and Harpy's Feather Duster. So yes, definitely run 1 Lightning Storm in this. And Lightning Storm was really good going second. It does have the restriction that you have to control no face-up cards. But at worst, like even if you can't use it, you can use it for discard fodder for ABC Dragon Buster. So yes, Lightning Storm. And now onto the trap cards. I cut the trap card count down to 7. So right now I have 3 Solemn Strikes. If you ask me which card is better between Solemn Strike and Solemn Warning, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I would have said Solemn Warning hands down. But if you ask me this question today, I would definitely say Solemn Strike is a bit better than Solemn Warning. So why is that? Why did my opinion on this card change? But let's start by looking at their cost. Solemn Warning costs 2,000 life points, while Solemn Strike costs 500 less at 1,500. And I know people may say 500 life points is not a big difference, but I disagree. I feel that with the current end-of-match procedures, especially if you're going into time, a 500 life point difference can easily make the difference between winning and losing. So let's see what else. What can Solemn's Warning negate that Solemn Strike cannot? Well, for one, it can negate Spell Trap if cards like Monster Reborn, Soul Charge, or Back to the Front, which have the effect that special summons. But if you think about it, Soul Charge is banned, Back to the Front, almost nobody runs, and also Monster Reborn is limited to one. So in that regard, like there's not that many spell traps that are good that special summon monsters. So I would say, even if I'd say Solemn Warning has that versatility, I would say it's better by a little bit. Both of them can negate inherent special summons, so no advantage there. Solemn Warning can also negate normal summons, which Solemn Strike cannot. But Solemn Strike can negate activated effects, whether they're on the field, in the hand, or in the graveyard, that do not involve summoning anything. And that's something that Solemn Warning cannot negate. And these days, in the current meta, there are a lot more of these than basically normal summons that don't have any activated effects, or spell trap cards that summon monsters. So in that regard, I would say yes, Warning is definitely has taken a backseat compared to Solemn Strike. 2 copies of Infinite Impermanence. These are still the same 2 copies that's always been here for ABCs. The reason I got Impermanence in the first place was because I did not initially have Effect Veiler. So I figured if I'm going to get a hand trap that can do something similar as Effect Veiler, I may as well get the best version there is. Next up, I run 1 Metaverse. I really wish that Terraforming can come back so I can cut Metaverse and replace it with another Terraforming, but that's probably not going to happen. But basically, I say Metaverse is the next best thing, because it's basically just a trap card of version of Terraforming. You do have to wait a turn, but I would rather wait a turn and be guaranteed to get my field spell than not be able to get it at all and just have to wait indefinitely. And the last card is 1 Back to the Front. I know a lot of people don't even bother playing this card, but in this particular deck, being able to summon back ABC Dragon Buster, and since Dragon Buster is not it's a banishing effect, it's not hard ones per turn. If your Dragon Buster is killed or gets kaiju'd, you can use Back to the Front to summon it back and get another banish off. So yes, run this 1 copy. 1 copy is enough because too many of these is kind of bricky. So that's it for the main deck. On to the extra deck. Obviously, we still have the one and only ABC Dragon Buster. I'm so relieved this card came back to 3, because now I can actually play this deck properly. No need to go further into this card, because this card is hands down, at worst, it's the 3rd best boss monster to ever come out of a structure deck. It might not be as powerful and as Ultimate Conductor Tyranno, and it's debatably inferior to something like a Master of Darklaw, but every other boss monster that's ever come out of a structure deck at any point is nowhere near as good as ABC Dragon Buster. Next, the 2 cards I run to combo with Instant Fusion: 1 Millennium Ice Restrict for when I go first, and 1 Thousand Ice Restrict for when I go second. Millennium Ice Restrict has the effect similar to Call by the Grave, and it can be used to block hand traps. Whereas Thousand Ice Restrict, on the other hand, it basically it equips any monster, proactively equips any monster your opponent controls to it, even if it's face down. So basically, going second, this card is non-destructive removal. Going first, Millennium Ice is a hand trap blocker. So yes, 1 copy of each. Now, onto the new Link monsters. I removed Saryuja Skull Dread because I feel that with cards like Phantasme, it already does something similar. And also, I feel that Saryuja Skull Dread is kind of like a win more card. Its draw 4 effect is almost like a catch-22, in the sense that if your hand is so bad that it desperately needs to be replaced and fixed, chances are you won't be able to get 4 monsters onto the field to summon Skull Dread in the first place. On the contrary, if you have 4 monsters on the field and you're linking them into Skull Dread, sure, you get to draw 4 cards, but if you have that many monsters to go into a Link summon anyway, you could have easily gone into something like a Borosword Dragon and gone for game either way. So in that sense, like Saryuja Skull Dread is just more of a win more card. Like it's not good enough to win you games on its own, but it's like if you're winning already, it just takes you that one step further. So in that sense, I decided to run cards like Borosword Dragon instead. And I do not consider, like, even though I do not consider Borosword Dragon decisively superior to something like a Boroload Dragon, like there are things that Boroload can do that Borosword cannot do. The reason why I run this is because I already have Mekk-Knight Crusadia Avermax, and this card, I would definitely say Avermax is definitely hands down superior to Boroload Dragon in every way whatsoever. Let's take a look. Both of them are Link Force with 3000 attack. Boroload protects against targeting from monster effects. Mekk-Knight Crusadia Avermax cannot be targeted, period. Avermax makes it so that all your opponent's other monsters have to attack it only. And also, it has a built-in honest effect that is not hard once per turn either. So, essentially, no matter what monster your opponent summons and tries to attack Avermax with, they won't be able to attack over it. And also, the last thing is that, yes, Boroload Dragon has a non-targeting, non-destructive removal in that it can just steal the opponent's monster. But Avermax also has something similar in the sense that if it's sent to the if it's sent to the graveyard, destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can basically shuffle one card your opponent controls into the deck. Non-targeting, non-destruction. So yes, that's definitely good. Now, I also run one Apollousa, Bowl of the Goddess. ABCs, like your ABC Dragon Buster, can always tag out into your 3 ABC pieces. And then you can essentially link those pieces, and that's already 3 of the 4 monsters necessary to go into Apollousa. So essentially, the good thing about Apollousa is that even though its effect is once per chain, it's not once per turn, which means you can use it to negate hand traps as well. And most of the time, if your opponent is using a monster heavy deck, they won't not be able to play through 4 negations, especially if their deck is reliant on going 4 monster effects. Next up, I run the Nightmare engine of Nightmare Unicorn, which basically it shuffles any card your opponent controls back into the deck. Nightmare Phoenix, which destroys back row, and Nightmare Cerberus, which destroys special summon monsters. And the best part about all 3 of these is that if its effect was activated while it was co-linked like they are now, you get to draw more cards. So essentially, it's additional draw power that comes in the generic draw power that comes in the form of your extra deck. So yes, these 3 are all really good. And the cool thing about Nightmare Phoenix and Nightmare Cerberus and Nightmare Unicorn is that if all of them are co-linked, they offer protection to all other co-link monsters. So Phoenix protects against destruction by battle, Cerberus protects against destruction by card effects, and Unicorn basically lets you draw extra cards. So in a co-link like this situation, none of them can be destroyed by battle or by card effect, and during your draw phase, you can draw 3 cards because you have 3 monsters that are co-linked. So yes, it's really helpful in like a... It's really helpful and it's really good utility to have. Next up, I run 1 Platinum Gadget, obviously because it gives you the extra special summon. Union Carrier, because it's a link monster specifically designed for this archetype. IP Masquerena. This card is actually really good because essentially, if you have this card on the field and a whole bunch of other monsters, let's say your ABC pieces, and maybe, let's say, another Union Carrier or something like that, that will basically simultaneously put your opponent under the threat of having to face any one of these. So basically, depending on what play your opponent goes for, you can dynamically transition from going into Apollousa, Borosword, or Mekk-Knight Crusadia Avermax, and to basically put your opponent in the worst possible situation depending on what place they decide to go after. So yes, and the last card I run is 1 Link Rebo, because again, the Thousand Eyes and Millennium Eyes are both level 1, and so are the Scapegoat tokens. Now onto the side deck. I still run 3 copies of Droll and Lockbird to stop those pesky decks from searching non-stop indefinitely. 3 Gammas to negate monster effects. Also, the cool thing about Gamma, it can be like an anti-hand trap. In the sense that if I activate, let's say, Union Hanger or Terraforming, and my opponent Ash Blossoms, I can immediately chain Gamma to block the Ash Blossom. And obviously, I have to run the 1 driver to make it work. Last monster is 1 Dino Wrestler Pankratops. It's like a free special summon, and it has a quick effect that pops any card. Really good for going second. And for going second, I also run 3 Dark Ruler No More. It's similar to Forbidden Droplets, but I would say Droplets is much better because it's a quick play. But Dark Ruler No More also says your opponent cannot activate monster effects in response to it. And it basically has a blanket effect that negates all your opponent's monster effects. Next up, I run 3 Evenly Matched, and this is self-explanatory. The quintessential card that made going second viable, and also 1 red Reboot, because again, it's similar to Call by the Grave in the sense that after it got hit, it became one of those cards that you may as well run that 1 copy of. So now that I finished showing the main, extra, and side deck, I want to talk about my experiences playing ABCs as an archetype, along with the pros and cons, strengths and weaknesses of it. Ironically, the biggest weakness of this archetype, this ABC as a deck, is also its biggest strength, and that is Union Hanger. This card is the Achilles heel of the deck, because when you have this card, it gives you a huge advantage. But when you don't have it, you're basically at a really huge disadvantage. This is why losing Terraforming was such a huge blow to this deck. Even more of a blow than losing Dragon Buster to 1, I would argue. So this deck does inherently have a huge reliance on cards like Union Hanger. And that is its, I would say, its biggest weakness. But other than that, like, what strength does it have? And from my experience, I would say that this deck, it literally, when you play it, it literally feels like it's playing offense and defense at the same time. What do I mean by that? Well, when you have Dragon Buster on the field, it's a 3,000 attack monster. That is a huge threat to your opponent. And it has a quick effect, and that you can essentially discard any card to the graveyard and banish any card your opponent controls. Non-destruction. And it's a quick effect. But while your opponent has to carefully play around Dragon Buster's disruption effect, they also have to watch out, because even if they summon an even bigger monster to try to run over Dragon Buster, they can easily just tag out the Dragon Buster and get out their 3 pieces to basically chump block, making it near impossible to OTK through that defensive field. And even if you manage to kill all their ABC pieces, all the ABC pieces float. So you're basically just letting them get more searches from the deck or recycle more cards from their graveyard. Or in the case of Crush Wyvern, special summon more pieces back onto the field. And then the best part is that next turn, they'll just banish those pieces, summon another Dragon Buster, and then it's just a repeat of the previous turn. So in this sense, I would say it can transition from play to play really smoothly and really dynamically, and is really well in responding and counter-attacking, regardless of how your opponent decides to respond. However, if your Dragon Buster gets Kaiju'd, because Kaiju tributing is a cost, it doesn't start a chain, that really hurts a lot. And Nibiru, it also hurts, but it's not as bad because, again, as previously mentioned, you have unauthorized reactivation to just equip an A Assault Core to it and make it unaffected by the Nibiru. But anyways, this is my most updated ABC deck profile. I will be making a combo tutorial video for this deck later on, and I will show you not only how to play in certain situations, but I will also show you how to play through interrupts. And that's another strength of this deck, at least the way I built it, in that it does not auto-lose if you get interrupted once. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and I look forward to seeing you again in my next video. Bye!